Hello and welcome to the Husband Help podcast, where you are going to learn how to be the best husband that you can be, no matter what your marriage is like right now. Today, we are picking it back up. Forgive me for the brief hiatus. We are going to go ahead and finish out this series that we've been doing for now a solid year, talking about lessons I've learned from 10 years of coaching men through separation. Now, these last two installments in this series are going to be a little bit different. Today, we're talking about things that I've changed my mind about since I started Husband Help Haven all the way back in 2011. Now, the reason that we have two episodes is because I'm going to try to and divide these things into sort of like two buckets. I'm going to have one episode, that's this one, that's going to be about the specific practices that I've changed my mind about, sort of strategies or tactics in separation that I no longer recommend, or that I recommend differently today than I did back when I first started coaching. Okay. The second episode is going to be more big picture, just on principle. What things have I changed my mind about for how I sort of think about marriage, think about reconciliation? So we're going to have sort of the practical rubber meets the road stuff first in this episode, and then we're going to go into more of the philosophy side in the next episode. So should be interesting. Now, one other thing that I just want to sort of get out of the way is like, why have episodes like this at all? Why is this worth doing? I remember when I was younger, I was listening to a man named Timothy Keller. Wonderful man, good Christian author. Many of you probably know him. He has actually a really good book on marriage, some really good work on apologetics. Really enjoyed his work. However, I remember listening to him talk one time, and he's made this point, and he was talking about something and giving as evidence of how true his opinion was on this thing. He said, "Well, I've thought the same way for the past 40 years on this topic. So that's how I'm very, very sure that I've made up my mind on the right thing." And he sort of also has this nice little turn of phrase, and I don't know if he came up with this or not, but it's, an open mind is like an open mouth. It's great to have it open, but it's meant to close on something, right? So this is good. You're supposed to make up your mind eventually. Once you make up your mind, okay, so now you're a little bit more into a closed minded state, and that's not such a bad thing sometimes. Okay. At the same time, uh, I think a hallmark of a learner and even just a strong mind generally, just a person prone to growth generally, is you're gonna look back and realize you were wrong about things. And if you never do that, you're probably not growing as much as you think you do. That doesn't mean that every single thing that you think today you need to view as being wrong, but it just means that I've had to sort of learn and tell myself and teach myself it's okay to change your mind on things. Okay. So, I want you to just sort of hear that up front is that in this episode and in the next episode, I'm going to share some things about how I sort of changed my mind about how I approach some of these things, but the mission has not changed. Who I want to be as a business owner, who I want to be as a husband, how I want to lead my marriage and my family, and how I coach and direct other men to try to repair and heal their marriage and lead their families. The mission there, leading the way in love, leading the way in sacrifice, striving to be the best man that you can be, giving yourself permission to be selfless and let go of fairness as a priority as you're going through these crises in your life. All of that still lies beneath the surface. So none of that has changed. Okay. The mission has not changed, just some of the implementation. So let's go ahead and get into it. There are four specific things that we're going to go through today. Okay. The first one is no contact. I don't recommend no contact ever anymore, virtually. The times that I recommend no contact are going to be the times where you really don't need anybody to recommend no contact because it's so obvious that that's what you have to do. I'm talking about the situations where there's extreme spousal mischief or there's court-ordered no contact via a restraining order or something like this. Generally, my entire approach to no contact today can be summed up as it's something you accept. Very rarely is it something that you implement. So there are some times and honestly, this is one of the things that I've had my mind changed on the longest. I included when I wrote Manly Marriage Revival. Some of you will know that name way back in the day. It was the first book that I wrote about just getting through this marriage stuff. I had a little section in there for emergency use only, no contact. And that pretty early on I recognized was a piece of industry advice that I sort of took on because everybody was talking about it. But I realized there was just some tension in this idea of putting no contact between you and your wife, being the one to drive that, and the rest of how I think about marriage and how I think about going through trying to repair a marriage. And my philosophy, as I've sort of clarified it and refined it over the years, is I believe that positive experiences are actually the prerequisite for reconciliation. Positive experiences together are the real prerequisite. That's the thing we have to have if we're going to get to relationship repair. Her having hard moments alone, which is many times the reason that men institute no contact in the first place, is they're like, you know what? She can't have her cake and eat it too. Cutting her off. I'm not going to talk to her anymore. I'm putting this space in here. It's also a means of punishment. And certainly I recognize that is not the way to do it. Sometimes there are situations that call for it. But really, I'll be honest. I think I overestimated, even in my sort of cautious approach, I think I still overestimated how often a situation truly warrants no contact. Today, I mean, honestly, I can't remember the last time. Well, I actually can, but it was years ago. It was the last time that I actually said, "You, Mr. Client, might need to consider no contact because this is a dangerous situation for you." And again, you can hear the reasoning there. It's not anything about trying to save the relationship. It's purely for protection. So again, there may still be situations where you are in no contact with your wife. Accept that, work with what you are getting there, and again, that's sort of its own episode, and maybe I'll drop in the show notes a link. I have an article. How do what do you do when there's low or no contact and you're trying to save your marriage with your wife? Okay, so I have an article about that. But the point I'm just trying to make here is I don't ever really recommend no contact anymore, even though I still see people out there recommending it. If you're trying to save your marriage, it doesn't make sense to me. So, um, that's number one. Number two, ultimatums. Kind of the same, right? It's sort of an extension, piggybacking off of that first one, ultimatums. Generally, this is one where I'll be honest, I think for a long time, I have read several books about ultimatums, about boundaries, and I just never felt like I had an understanding of boundaries that made sense to me. And you can go into peace and control, and I have this framework on boundaries, and it's still pretty good. It's still pretty decent, but I've really refined my understanding of boundaries over the years, and with that too has come a refinement of how I implement ultimatums. Again, ultimatums is one of those things that's like you can't get into really any marriage or relationship book and not hear about boundaries. So many times, I feel that even when the author is trying not to take it this way, boundaries are presented in a punitive way. It is here is how you get the relationship that you want, is by having these things that you're going to enforce onto your spouse. So I'm never doing that. Never. I'm never doing that. And generally, in my experience, again, this is one of those things where I try to present it softly early on. As I've talked men through it, 90% of the guys who come to me curious about if they're at the point where they need to put an ultimatum to their wife, and when I say that, an ultimatum to me is do this thing or else, or stop doing this thing or else. There really just are very few situations where I think a guy, first off, would even be able to follow through, because most guys will talk a big talk about this, but then when it comes time to actually, they might even enforce the ultimatum at first, but it's like a week later, and then we're ready to let go of it, even though she hasn't met the conditions of the or else, or like unmet the conditions of the or else. So if you're inside Husband Help Group, if you've been through any any of my communication teachings, or if you've been on the Q&A calls, you've heard me talk about boundaries before. But the short version is I just don't typically recommend ultimatums. And until you really are ready to put the or else into action, well, first off, your or else is either too big, or you're actually not at the point where you need an ultimatum. You need a different tool. You just need to maybe express something. You need to have some sort of self-care. You need to maybe have an internal boundary rather than an external boundary with her, one way or another. Again, there are exceptions. Notice I said 90%, not 100%. And there's a time and a place for ultimatums that's probably slightly broader than the time and place for no contact. I mean, that is true. That, there are situations where you'd have boundaries that would still fall very far short of no contact. All the same, this is just something that I've really pulled back from. Now, if we keep going here, the next thing on my list that I've really changed my mind about, or that I've just sort of, and again, you can hear in these things, it's not necessarily that I've changed my mind, it's that I've sort of dialed back how often I think these things apply, right? Enough to me to say, "Oh, this is a noticeable difference in how I approach these topics." So another instance of that would be the topic of moving out. I used to be kind of in the like 60-40, 70-30, 70 being the stay in the home, 30 being the okay, it kind of makes sense to move out. Now I put myself more in the 90-10. Right? As in 90% of the time, you probably ought to stay in the home until it's sort of legally necessary to move out. Now, I have to say, disclaimer here, I am not an attorney. Please, your attorney's advice should override anything you hear on a podcast when it comes to navigating this process in real life, in what you're going through. So if your attorney says, hey, it is time to move out, it is time to consider this, or at least it's time for you to make sure that you understand the costs of staying, the real costs, please listen to their advice. I'm not trying to override anything. I am not an attorney. So, but what I am saying is that from a relationship rebuilding point of view, the times where I think moving out makes sense are almost zero. Now, again, sometimes your wife is insisting on it. Sometimes she's asking for it. Sometimes it really feels like this is something she's entrenched on, and we are granting her that as as a means of cooperation, because we accept we don't want to trap her in the relationship. We're not interested in unilaterally slamming the gates shut on the marriage. You can't leave. You're stuck in here with me. So there are times, and I have clients occasionally even do something like a trial separation and move out for a period of time. Again, a whole video could probably be made just about how to go do trial separations in a good way. But for now, I'll just say, if you are one of those guys feeling like you just should move out, either because your wife is kind of hounding you to do it, um, or because you just are feeling sort of emotionally like it's hard to stay in the home, I would urge you to try to endure in the home as long as you can. The plain and simple truth is you have more opportunities to reconnect when you live together. That's just how it is. That doesn't mean that the opportunities are totally gone if you move out. And sometimes the tension or the sort of toxic dynamic, if I can use that word, is such that you just have to kind of hit the reset button and move out. And again, I there's a way to do a temporary separation that is good. There's things short of just fully moving out, such as nesting, that you can consider. Um, but the point is, I generally my answer is a bit quicker when a guy comes to me and says, Stephen, I've been thinking about whether I should maybe move out. I don't know, things have been kind of awkward in the home. Almost no consideration needed on those. No, don't move out. So um, that's number 3. Now, number 4, this is the one that I'm the most. In a way, I've changed the most and changed the least on this one, and that is the place of marriage counseling. So most if you know me, and this is something that I've had to work through, and there has been some therapeutic benefit to doing Husband Help Haven and to working with men and to going through my own marriage and putting some years. I mean, I'm past the decade mark in my own marriage now, and so um, look, I've been into marriage counseling. I've been into personal counseling. Both of those things have been helpful to me. And so, I came into Husband Help Haven when I started it. Part of the reason I felt so driven even to start it is because I felt like the solutions offered to fix marriages were insufficient. And evidence for that was my own parents' experience. Without getting into the details of that, they should have been the perfect candidates for marriage counseling. Even granting that marriage counseling doesn't work very well or is much less effective when you have a mixed agenda couple. Okay, so you got a couple where the wife is out of the marriage and the husband is still trying to work on the marriage. That counseling is not going to change anything. Same thing. A lot of times before you get to that point, you might have wife is trying to get the marriage to be better. Husband is super uninterested in counseling. Okay, guess what? Guess how much changes from those sessions? Nothing, right? However, when you have two spouses who come into counseling saying, we want to make the marriage to work and we are willing to look at our own stuff and change our own stuff to make it work, those should be the easy slam dunks, right? And that was my parents, and yet still they ended up divorced. And so I had real animosity. I put real blame, and I still do actually put, I think, rightful blame on some of the wrong help that they got. Now, What I've learned over the years is that marriage counseling, again, as I said, I personally have experienced marriage counseling is a good thing. Counseling is a great thing. Um, I think that the models taught in counseling can be very useful. The actual tools themselves, the communication tools, the psychological tools, the sort of mental health practices, again, and there's so many different varieties of therapy. Um, Generally, they all have some merit to them. They all have value. If you go into them with an open mind and a submissive attitude, open to learning and changing and plumbing the depths of your stuff, you will grow and your relationship will improve with a couple little asterisks on top of that. You have to get a good counselor. You do have, there's only so much. You have a much lower ceiling on how much positive change you can see if you don't get a good counselor, or whether, maybe we shouldn't say a good counselor, bad counselor, but maybe just a counselor that fits with you and is aligned with your goals. Sometimes it's hard to tell that from the web page or the directory page for the counselor. It's not always so obvious. And, okay. Um, Same thing with individual counseling, even, I would say. Although, again, I think that there's a little bit of a lower bar. There is some value to just having a safe person to go and vent to. That's a pretty low bar for a counselor. Uh, but I would still say if you want to actually see real personal change, personal growth, you need somebody who knows what they're doing and who is really legitimately trustworthy. They're worthy of trust. So, um, my take now is that if a guy comes to me and he is in separation and he says, "Steven, should I try to get my wife into marriage counseling?" My answer is no, still, which that's always been it's my answer, but now it's a little bit more nuanced, which is that I say, "No, not right now. Instead, look into individual counseling." And I am so happy and so keen to encourage men to do that. I think there really is a lot of value in individual counseling, um, almost across all situations. The couples counseling is the one that's much more um, tough to lay up. So if you are in a situation where you're separated and you're trying to figure out, you want to get your wife into counseling somehow, some way, I'm going to sort of encourage you to consider something other than straight up marriage counseling because it's probably not the right answer. It's probably not the right direction. So as much as, like, on principle, I don't like the idea of discernment counseling, my priority on alignment during separation is such that I might still suggest discernment counseling if you're looking to just sit in a counselor's office with your wife. Sometimes you're in a situation where you can't have a productive conversation with your wife. Either she's, like, drawn a boundary around, uh, I won't talk to you without the third party present. Sometimes it's just, man, you just need somebody to sort of be that guardrail to keep the conversation moving forward, whatever the reason is. Um, if we can align on something that's not just fixing the relationship, let's be better co-parents. Let's do our due diligence. Let's get better at our communication for the sake of the kids or for making this mediation process easier, whatever. Let's get closure. These are things where I think because what we need to be a willingness to be vulnerable. And if a wife is coming into couples counseling and she doesn't want to save the marriage, she's not going to be vulnerable. And so this is why. Now, actually, I've gone on this whole ramble about how to make couples counseling work in separation. The point that I'm trying to make in this section is what has changed for me is a deeper respect for the ceiling, the high ceiling of couples counseling, a universal heightening of my respect for individual counseling and the counseling tools. So if you just strip away the actual counselors and only look at the tools and the practices and the sort of mental health models, psychological models, all of these things I think have a lot of value, or at least there's real learning to be had from them. So, okay. Guys, I was listening back through and I just wanted to make sure that I tie this whole thing up in a nice, neat little bow for us as we segue out of this episode. Because if I had to name the single biggest shift that unifies these different changes in how I approach separation, it's that I used to think about rebuilding attraction. And that was sort of the main driving force of a lot of what we would do. Now, that is still a good thing to do, and attraction is more than just the physical attraction that so many people, or even like the masculine feminine attraction. There's something more there to it, I think, than that. But th- I think about some of these things differently, and I think that the key difference is it's more now about just demonstrating that change is possible. Change is possible. So this is why, again, no contact, thinking back, that doesn't demonstrate anything. She sees distance. She doesn't see change. Now, again, the slight little asterisk, if you've never been able to give her any space, okay, now we're showing some change. Counseling, on the flip side, what we just talked about, the times that it does work is when it's showing her that there's a real possibility of change. Ultimatums, they don't demonstrate change. They just prove power. They just prove leverage. Moving out doesn't demonstrate change. It just gives her distance. Okay? So this is sort of the shift in the question that I'm asking over so many different separations. It's not just how do I get her back? It's how do I show her through how I live and what I say that real change has happened, or at least that it's possible. And so that's sort of the universal theme is I've learned more about what it means to implement integrity and hope and love and commitment in a separation. And I've also grown in my confidence to the point where I'm willing to say, despite these being industry practices and industry pieces of advice, I'm willing to say I don't like them. And I don't think they're right, and I don't think they're good, and I don't think they help. So, that's what I'm doing here. So I hope that this has helped you. I hope that you got something out of this. If you would like to go through whatever it is that you are going through with a community of men, please come check out Husband Help Group. Again, if we explore stuff like this all the time in that group, there's guys who are wrestling with these issues in real time. And if you think, hey, maybe I am that like 10% situation where it makes sense to move out, but I just want to talk through it with people who understand it, again, that is literally the perfect place to hop into Husband Help Group, even just for a month or two, just to see you through the hardest part of whatever it is that you're going through. Either way, just like this podcast, I hope that Husband Help Haven as a whole and everything that we offer here is just viewed as a tool in your tool belt. I am here to help you. I'm here to serve you because I want you to have everything that you need to fight effectively for your marriage as you're going through whatever it is that you're going through in your life right now. So thank you so much for listening. If you are interested in Husband Help Group, go visit husbandhelphaven.com/group. There should be a link on the screen here. There'll also be one in the description. Thank you for listening, guys. We will see you next time to close out our series finally with big picture things that I've changed my mind about, similar to this episode, but a little bit more philosophically. So hope you to see you on that one. Until then, much manly love, and thank you for listening.